Hi everyone, so I'm going to be doing just a quick tutorial on Excel ranging from some basic skills to how to make tables and just some important functions. So this will cover a lot of different skill sets and hopefully give a good background. So just to start, I wanted to give an overview of some basic Excel skills. So this is Excel, Microsoft 365, and the first thing I want to show you is quote unquote how to teach Excel to do something. So here's a very basic example that I drew out. So I gave Excel 4 examples, but say I want this to grow by $10,000 every year, but I don't want to type that all out. I taught Excel that I want the year to grow by 1, and I taught Excel I want the revenue to grow by $10,000. So all I'm going to do is highlight this and pull it down. And you can see just from that, Excel knows what it's doing. It's growing the year by 1 and it's growing the revenue by 10,000. And I can pull this down as much as I possibly want, and Excel continues to know what I want it to do. So that's a super quick and easy drag down feature that can be extremely applicable. So that was just with addition. But let's say I had 1, 2, 3. I like to give 3 or 4 times just to kind of teach Excel. Let's say I had $10,000. So let's say I had $10,000 again, but let's say I wanted this to grow by 20%. So I would press equal, click this cell, and then Excel 4 times, you just do the little asterisk and 1.20, enter. So it did that math for me. So I'm gonna do it one more time, times 1.20. Great, so now I've taught Excel. So I highlight and I drag. And to kind of see if Excel is doing it right, you can double click on the cell and see it's continuously doing what I asked it to do and continuously growing by 20%. And I can drag this down as much as I want. But this is just a very applicable feature when trying to do finance in Excel. So the next thing I wanted to show you that's just very important for like data visualization is the length of a cell. So let's say instead of 10,000, I had a way bigger number that just doesn't fit well. You see how these turned into errors? It's not because there's an issue. It's because the number is too big and it won't fit. So what you can do is select the column, and now you see how there's this little kind of T-shaped icon here, and double click. That'll make Excel expand the column to the width that you need it to be to fit all of your data. If you don't want it this big, you can drag it yourself. But see, you won't be able to see the full number. But the issue with this is it has one number after the period. If I don't want that, I can highlight these, go up here and just click this to add more zeros or bring the zeros in if I want. So that's a quick tip for that. So the next thing I wanted to show you was just how to make something, $, numbers, currencies, percentages, etc. So let's say these were actually not in a currency. Let's say these should have been a percent. I'd go up here and I have all of these options. So I could just make these a general number. I could make these a currency. You could make them literally a date in Excel. So there's a lot of things you can do with this quick tool in Excel. And then let's say for, as finance individuals, there's a lot that we do with stocks. So let's say we have Tesla and let's do like Apple and a few other stocks, whatever. You highlight this, and then you can go to the data tab in Excel and click stocks. Because I was thinking about it. But what it's going to do is add the ticker and the exchange. And then what you can do is go to this add button, and it'll give you a ton of information about the stock. So let's do Tesla. Now I want to expand that column. I'm going to double click here, and it'll tell me exactly where Tesla is actually headquartered. We can do the same thing for Apple. So I can actually do like industry, computers, phones, and households. And this is a very important feature when you're potentially making dashboards in Excel or doing a lot of other things. You can also do this with geography. So let's do like San Diego. We can do geography. There's a lot of different options, but let's do geography, for example. Perfect. So it recognizes San Diego. I can go to add and I can do even an image. Oh, it doesn't like, yeah, it makes a very small image, but that is San Diego. You can do, let's do country, United States. It showed up over here for some reason because I already had the image in here. But there's a lot of really cool things like the time zone that you can do with this feature. So the last thing I wanted to show you is what an absolute reference is in Excel. So I'm going to slide over here just to give myself a little bit more space. But an absolute reference is a very important feature you'll need to know, but I'll show it just as a really small scale so you can kind of understand the concept. But let's say we wanted to multiply all of these numbers by 200. What we would do, like I showed you, equals 1 times this cell. Then, like I showed you, the drag down feature in Excel. You should be able to go to the bottom right corner where it turns into like a black little T and double click and it'll drag it all down. However, you see there's an error. Let's check out what the error is. I'm going to double click on this cell and see that not only did it move down to the 2, but it moved this down 1 cell as well, which is what it should have done because I didn't use absolute references. I want to lock in this 200. So it multiplies everything by 200. So in my equation, I'm going to use a $sign, and that's how you lock something. So now that I have this locked, I don't want this locked because I want this to go from 1, 2, 3, and 4. Press enter and pull it down. And now I can see it worked perfectly. It locked in the 200, but it didn't lock in these numbers because I want those to continuously go down. So this is an extremely valuable feature because I can drag this down as much as I want, and it's still going to be using that 200 because I locked in absolute referenced it. So those are a few basic skills. The next thing I wanted to go into was some just important functions that I think you'll find value in Excel. So the first thing I wanted to show you was the sum function. So what I need is a bunch of numbers. So how I'm going to do that is just use the rand function in Excel. And that's just going to give me any random number between 0 and 1. So I'm just going to drag this down and it's going to continue giving me random numbers. So every time I click, I get a new random number. But I want to know the sum of this. There's a few different ways you can do it. The biggest and simplest way is the equals sum function. So I'm going to type equals sum. And Excel actually gives you a little tip here. It says adds all the numbers in a range of cells, parentheses, and then I'm going to highlight all of my data, and parentheses, and enter. Now I know the sum of all of this is 9.2. However, there's an easier way. All you have to do is highlight all of these and then look at the bottom of the screen here. In the bottom right, not only does it tell you the average, but it tells you the count. So there are 17 numbers and it tells you the sum of 9.22, which is right here. So it's the same thing, but let's say I had a way longer data set. All you have to do, maybe the data set fills the entire column. I can just, let's get rid of the sum, click on E over here and it highlights the entire column for me. And I get the same information at the bottom. Obviously, it changed a little bit since these are random variables that are continuing to change, but this is a very helpful tool for any data. Just highlight it and look in the bottom right of your screen. It'll give you significantly more data than you had before. There's also an average function. So yes, you can use that quick trick, but you can also just type in average, parentheses, highlight the whole thing, enter, gives me the average. The next thing I wanted to show you is an if statement. So this is really important in Excel. When you have, let's say, a lot of different accounts and you want to know the ones that are maybe assigned to a specific individual. So we'll do this with numbers just for an example, but you use if, parentheses, and now Excel is going to basically tell me how to do it. But let's say we want to know if the value, so we'll do it here. If this value is equal to, and then for an example, you'd set this to like an individual if you wanted to see if the account was assigned to them. But for now, we're going to say if this is greater than 0, comma, we want it to return a true. But if this is less than 0, we want to return a false. Close parentheses and enter. Oh. It doesn't like me. Return a false. Oh, yeah, there we go. So I was missing a quick if sign here. You want to make sure you have an if for both of them. If it's less than this, do this. If it's less than that, do that. So one thing with Excel is sometimes you just got to trial and error. So then I can drag that down with the drag down trick and realize they're all true. But there's a way bigger application to this. And if you had a lot of data, and let's say these were a bunch of accounts, I can say, if this account equals quotation marks Alexandra, return X, and you can decide exactly what you want it to do over a large data set, and it's a very valuable tool. The next thing is count. So let's say I want to know how many numbers I have here. How many trues are there? Equal count, highlight it all, and I can see that I have, oh, it has to be of a number, my bad. Count, and there are 17 of those. You can also do a count if. So it's a kind of a combination of the two. Count this if it's this. So then you can have those account names like, okay, if this is assigned to Alexandra, count it. If it's not, don't. So I guess to get to some of the more complicated tools that I wanted to show you that I think are very valuable, let's start the X lookup. So first I'm going to clear off this data just to make it easier for you to see. So just to give you an idea of when you would use this, I use this today in a project where we downloaded stuff from the advisor website, but it didn't have the SEC ID. It was on a completely different file, but there were hundreds of data points. I didn't want to go through individually and find which SEC ID went to what plan. So to do this in literally less than 2 minutes, I used an X and a VLOOKUP. What this does is if you can find a common trait, so for me, a ticker was assigned on both sheets. So I looked up the ticker and found the SEC ID that was assigned to both. And by doing that, I could easily connect the two sheets and do hours of work in just a few minutes. So here's a super brief example that I did. This is going to be an account number, and then this is going to be the Salesforce ID attached with it. But let's say I was given these 22 data points. Usually it's at a way larger scale. And I had them here, and let's say they were in a completely different order. So they were now largest to smallest instead. So now I'm like, oh no, I want to attach these Salesforce IDs, but I can't because they're in a different order and I don't want to individually go through and figure it out. So we're going to use an XLOOKUP equals XLOOKUP. And one great thing about Excel is it kind of tells you what needs to go into the equation. So here I see we need the lookup value. So the lookup value is what's going to be in common. So that's going to be that ticker, for example, in that assignment I did. But here, if you look at these, the one thing in common is that account number. So I'm going to click 22, comma, the lookup array. We're going to look up 22 in this entire array as that account number. And then the next thing Excel asks for is the return array. So we want to look up the account ID, but we want that, let's say, SEC ID or the Salesforce ID. So now I'm going to highlight this column and close that parentheses and press enter. And wow, it worked perfectly. So we can check our work. So the 22 was assigned to the Salesforce ID 0.538. You can see here 0.538. Now we can use that drag down tool we learned. Go to the bottom right, double click, and here we go. This is a perfect example of why we need absolute references. So you can see these all errored out, and that's my fault. I wrote the equation wrong. But let's check why. If I double click this and see the equation, these shifted themselves all the way down because I didn't lock in that array. So we're going to go back and clear these out, and we're going to fix this. So we want to lock in the account ID and the Salesforce ID so that array doesn't continue to go down. So I'm going to go here and I'm going to absolute reference these. And now that should fix our problem completely. Perfect. Now we can check our work. We have 1 is 1, 2, 3, 4, and 1 is 1, 2, 3, 4, etc. So this is massive applications when you're dealing with a lot of data and you have that common value. So an XLOOKUP is the new version of the VLOOKUP, but I'll quickly show you how to do a VLOOKUP. You're going to get the exact same answer, but it is just another method of doing it. So equals VLOOKUP, and it's going to tell us a little different here. So our lookup value is still going to be the 22, but it asks us for the entire table array. So I'm going to highlight this entire table. So this has a lot of value when you have a big table, but you're only looking for something very specific within that table. So I'm not going to make the same mistake again. I'm definitely going to go through and absolute reference this. And the dollar sign is basically locking it in. So you can see I put one before and after. That means I'm locking in the row and the column. And then it asked me for the column index. So here, this is kind of what we want is that return array. So here it's going to be 1, 2. So it's the second thing in that table array that I want it to return. That's a Salesforce ID. But let's say I had a huge table and it was the 10th value. I would then put 10 there. And then you have to say true or false. Do I want an exact match of the account ID or do I want an approximate match? I always want an exact match. So I'm going to put false, enter. And you can check my work and it works perfectly. And then we'll do the same trick and realize it works great. I locked in everything and that's the value of an XLOOKUP and a VLOOKUP. So the next thing I wanted to show you is transpose. This has a lot of value when you're dealing with a lot of data, but you're trying to organize it. So right now we have the account IDs in one vertical line, but let's say we want to organize it in a cleaner table going horizontally. Equals the transpose function. And I'm just going to highlight this account ID. That's it, that array, press enter. And now I have all of this data right here in this row, but it's horizontal. It's a very efficient function to save you a lot of time. And then the last thing I wanted to show you was pasting things as values. So right now, the biggest issue with what I did here was that the equation connects to that other array here. But let's say I only wanted this and I didn't want this. If I delete this, these are all going to error out because that was what they were connected to. So what I want to do is paste these as values. That way they're not equations anymore. So if I click on this, I see an equation, but I don't want equation. I just want them to be a number. So I'm going to Control C to copy. And then I'm going to right click, paste special, and a paste as a value. Now, when I click on these, it's just a number. So I can get rid of all of this and have my final result. So that is how you paste as values. So one of the last things I wanted to show you was just a few tips and tricks in Excel. So the first one is how to make easy graphics that can just have a lot of value and support something that you're trying to present to maybe an advisor. So right now I'm just going to show you a super basic version, but this is year in revenue. So all I'm going to do is just highlight this. I'll probably have more data in the future. Then you'll want to go to insert. And then one cool thing about Excel is it gives you recommended charts. If I click this, it's going to recommend a bar chart. It might recommend a line chart, pie chart, etc. But if I want to see more options, I just go to all charts and I can select. So for this example, I just want a bar chart to show the revenue growth. And easy, bar chart's done. I can click these and change the color. I can click these and right click, go to format axis, and you can edit everything in here. So if I want these numbers to be currency instead, I can change that here. Now I have dollars. If I don't want these two decimal places, I can go to decimal places and type 0. Easy. So that's how you can make easy graphics in Excel. One other quick tip I wanted to show you guys was Excel's paintbrush tool. So let's say I had a bunch of data, but it was messed up. So let's say these three were highlighted, they were italicized, and they were in some random font. And let's say size 16. And I really like how this looks. And I want the rest of my data to look like that. All I have to do is highlight this. This is what I want it to look like. Go to the paintbrush tool. And then I want the rest of my chart to look like that. Highlight the rest of my chart. And it all adapts to what I paintbrushed. The last thing I wanted to show you was conditional formatting. So let me use the paintbrush tool again to get rid of this. I want it just to be a white background. So I'm going to click this cell, paintbrush, and highlight all of this, and it's going to get rid of it all. So conditional formatting is a great tool. So what I'm going to do is highlight this. I want to show that $50,000 is so much bigger than that 10,000. This is a really big plan. Let's say I have a lot of data. I'm going to go to conditional formatting. I'm going to go to color cells and I'm going to pick any one of these. I want this one. And this is just going to show me 10,000 low. And as you get higher and higher, the $50,000 is in a bright green. So you can continue to add a lot more data and you'll see the color scale adjust. But this is just a great way to show how things are changing over time, just to easily identify something. And then one quick trick is if you're playing with dates and looking at, maybe the dates of specific plans, you can do the at today function on Excel, and it'll tell you the date that today is. So you can always drag that down and play around with the date depending on what day it is and what time it is. But that's just another quick function that I think has a lot of value. So last tab I wanted to show you, and then I'll be done talking, is the table function on Excel. So I have all of this data. I have the year, the revenue, let's say the CSM on the account, and whoever that organization, whoever the plan is with. I'm going to highlight all of this data. I'm going to press Control T. You can also go to Insert and Insert Table, but I'm going to select my table has headers because it does, and I'm going to press OK. By pressing Control T, I can easily turn anything into a table. And the value of having this in a table is that I can now filter it. So let's say I only want to look at years 1 through 5. I can unselect them all, just click years 1 through 5 and press OK. And now I only see years 1 through 5, and then I can easily unfilter it and get it back to how it was. You can even filter by date. You can filter by smallest to largest, etc. So I'm going to unfilter this so I can make sure we can see it all. And we can filter by CSM. So let's say we only wanted to look at Sam's accounts. We'd click Sam and then we'd only see his account. So on a large scale, if we're working with thousands of data points, this is a really beneficial tool. So I hope that was helpful. Please let me know if you have any questions and I'm happy to help further.